point of emphasis, and without Trevor Booker, those four guys, and I've told them, you guys need to be able to score down here if you can't command a double team. If they're not going to double team you, you're going to have to get some baskets one-on-one. And hopefully they're excited by that challenge, to know that, hey, we still have confidence in you, that we're going to throw you the ball, and you guys got to go from there. And I think they like that.
Sounds like a more deliberate.
It'll be a little more deliberate. I mean, it's not going to be, walk it up every possession and try to win in the 40s. But I think the best teams can do both. I think the best teams can win in the 50s and they can win in the 80s. I always think there's a tremendous misconception that, like, you watch the NCAA tournament in the Final Four, and where were the games? They were all in the 50s. They barely even made the 60s. I mean, it's high pressure, lower possession basketball. And I'm not saying that that's the only way to win, because certainly North Carolina plays a completely different style. But I think that a lot of times, especially come the end of the season, come tournament play, the game grinds slower. And so you better be prepared to win some of those games, unless you just have so much more talent than everybody, and you're going to outscore everybody. And so we're going to try to put together a team that can win in the 50s and win in the 80s.
By what you were just saying, are you kind of hinting on that you're building a more NCAA tournament ready team?
No, I'm not at all saying that, because that would be a discredit to what Coach Brownell did. I haven't won an NCAA tournament game either, and I'm 0-3 in the tournament. It's hard. Coach Brownell did a tremendous job here, took this program and did some wonderful things with it. Just wasn't fortunate enough to win an NCAA tournament game. Now, I do think that, maybe the style of play at times doesn't lend itself to the NCAA tournament. Do I believe that? Yeah, a little bit. That's why I don't press all the time. I think some kids are better in the open court, and I think the better teams you play, they handle presses better, and so sometimes that's more difficult. I think what the press did, I think the press was great for Little John. I think it was great to incite the crowd. I think it made it an unbelievable home court, because when you're pressing, you rattle teams more at home. When there's 10,000 people cheering, everybody gets a little bit more rattled, especially your opponent, and the press becomes even more valuable. But then in other situations, it's not always as effective, and you got to have other ways to do things. But I'm not saying that just our style is going to mean we're going to do this much better or that his style wouldn't work, because there's teams that have used that style and been successful. There's a lot of different ways to play the game, and that's what's great about it.
Is it safe to assume you've never coached a team that has four guys 6'8" or taller?
Yeah, I've never had that. That's the one thing about mid-major basketball that's very difficult, is to recruit big guys that are truly big and talented. You can recruit some big guys, they're not always as talented. So that's exciting for me, and it's something I'm going to have to learn to do and learn to deal with. But it's hopefully that will become a strength of our team. Those guys need to be successful this year for us to be good.
How do you feel about maybe the outside expectations for this team? It seems like with the transition from Coach Brownell to you, and maybe some of the difference in style, there might be an opportunity for teams to take a step back this year. How do you manage that?
Well, I guess my answer to that is I'm hoping that people are just thinking that's more that they lost Trevor Booker than it is that there's been a change in coach, or that anything of that nature. And that's, I think, again, anytime you lose we haven't had a whole lot of guys as good as Trevor Booker at Clemson, and it's not going to be hard to have many that are as good in the future. Anytime you lose a player who's done that much for you, it's never easy to flip the switch on how you're going to go forward. Having said that, that's what the deal is. You got to go forward. They're going to play the games, and you got to be ready. In terms of the expectations, I don't worry about it. My expectations are always high for me and our staff and our team, and we're going to be as critical of ourselves as anybody will be, and the challenge is us to just do the best we can with our personnel and to get better every day doing it.
De Montes was a guy last year who at times he could create his own shot pretty easily. I think he was one of the better defenders at getting deflections and playing.
Yeah.
on the ball. He has some good qualities, but
Yeah, he
where can he
does.
grow as a player and
He-
be a real impact guy?
Yeah, de Montes is a pretty talented guy. He's had some good experience. He's a competitive guy. The biggest thing that when I met with de Montes that I talked about that I enjoyed in watching him for the first few workouts is how competitive he is. He's a very competitive guy. When backed into a corner, he's going to swing. He's going to fight, and he's a proud kid. He plays with a chip on his shoulder, like he wasn't a 4 or 5 star recruit, and he should have been. And that's, again, he's a prime example of a guy who's a very good player that a lot of people weren't sure if he could play at this level. And he's a talented guy. Now, what does he need to get better at? He only had to take open threes last year. Because of Trevor Booker being double teamed, de Montes got to shoot wide open shots. So his 3-point percentage went up. Now, part of that's because he took great shots and because he worked on his shot. This year, I don't know if his percentage will be as good, but he's got to make more. He's going to have to make more difficult ones, and he's going to have to make big-time shots. When the other team knows he needs to score, he's going to have to still find a way to score. His ball handling will get better. He's a very good defender. The real other thing is just leadership, and it sounds like coach speak, but we need somebody to take over as a leader of the program, to be a face, to be the calming influence when we're playing on the road and there's 10,000 people screaming. Who's going to settle our team down? As a coach, coaches get way too much credit for, like, they call this wonderful timeout, and like that settled the calm, and everybody came over and you threw some magic dust on them and like went back out and they made a great play. That's all overrated. Your players make the plays. Your players get things done. He's got to become a very good leader, and I think he's not a vocal kid by nature, but he's trying to become one, and he has the respect of our team, and hopefully that will happen.
After the change last year, Coach, it seemed like he took a little bit of that ownership more. Did you see that with him, that he's kind of taken some of that little ownership?
I think he's wanted to be asked to do it, and maybe hasn't been asked in the way that I've asked. And again, some of that's because of the nature of he had good older players ahead of him. He had great respect for some of the guys he's played with in his career. Casey Rivers is another guy that he's mentioned as a guy that he respected. And he's learned from those guys, and he's a guy who I think yearns to be that kind of leader and that kind of stature on a team, and he thinks he deserves it, and he does deserve it. Now he's got to make the most of that opportunity.
Your niche in this conference is playing against people like Duke and North Carolina to essentially recruit at a completely different level. I mean, there's nobody on their team that you could have had, and they probably could have had anybody on your team if they wanted.
I hope not everybody, and
But-
hopefully not
but
anybody,
For
but
the
you're
most-
probably
for the
correct.
most part,
You're
but
correct.
what I'm
Yes.
getting at is that seems to be kind of consistent with some of the places you've coached in the past, and does that in any way, because of where you've been, does that become kind of an advantage?
No, it's really, it's a good observation. And you know what I've found is that it's like the haves and the have-nots. And when you're in mid-major basketball, everybody has something, we all look at each other, and it's even in high major, we all look at each other and, well, if we only had what they had, if we were you can't worry about kind of what other people are doing. We can't get caught up with who Duke and Carolina are recruiting and worrying about what they're doing in terms of those kinds of things. We've got to worry about us, and we've got to control what we can control. And we've got to recruit kids that are good players, that are going to be good teammates, that really want to come to Clemson. And that's where I've found that I've been successful maybe in putting different types of players together to form a team. I think is as much the value in recruiting as just going out and getting the best. You can have a lot of great ingredients, but if they don't go well together, you're not going to have a great soup. And you've got to have all these different ingredients fit, and that's what you have to do at Clemson. You have to do that at some other places I've been, Wright State, even UNC Wilmington. You have to find ways to make your program fit in a league, and you know, Oliver did a good job in finding a different way for him to be successful. And we've got to do that same thing. But I think, to your point, yeah, we can't worry day in, day out on what Duke's doing, who they're recruiting, what North Carolina's doing, who they're recruiting. They got so-and-so. You just got to go. And, you know.
But that's kind of a comfort